No actor can make such a bold statement that they only had one audition their whole life.
No, because I know there was a big outcry from people. They was trying to get Bill to give his trophies back. You know you f***ed up when they want you to give your trophies back.
Even I've mastered the art of walking away from the train wreck confidently.
But it has to be perfect because I don't want to do anything else that sucks.
Yeah.
What does it take for Eddie Murphy, a man who has worked with almost everyone, to completely cut someone off? No reconciliations, no collaborations, not even a picture together. Just gone. In Hollywood, grudges spill out in tabloids, but Eddie approached it differently. Strategic exits, razor-edged remarks, and a memory sharper than revenge. 6 comedians learned that the hard way. And by the time you reach the very last name on this list, you'll realize it wasn't hate at all. It was something much more powerful. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1, David Spade. When David Spade joined Saturday Night Live in the early 90s, he carved out a niche with his quick sarcasm and sarcastic charm. One of his most popular bits was Hollywood Minute, where he'd flash celebrity photos and throw out one-liners that could sting. The audience loved it because no one seemed off-limits. But one night, Spade held up a photo of Eddie Murphy and called him a falling star. The joke landed with the crowd, but the timing and the target cut differently than usual. For Eddie, this wasn't just another punchline. He had carried SNL through a rough patch in the early 80s, practically keeping the show on the air with his characters. To hear that insult not from a critic, but from inside the very stage he once kept alive, carried a deeper weight. Eddie didn't clap back publicly. He didn't trade insults or jokes at Spade's expense. He made it clear he wouldn't step foot on SNL as long as Spade was part of the cast, and he kept that distance. By freezing him out completely, Eddie showed boundaries were stronger than retaliation. Number 2, Bill Cosby. In the mid-1980s, Bill Cosby made it clear he wasn't pleased with Eddie Murphy's style. He told Murphy that his act should be cleaner, that as a rising star, he owed young fans a better example. To Cosby, comedy was supposed to carry a sense of moral responsibility. Murphy, who was filling arenas with unfiltered stories and language, didn't see himself that way. He saw comedy as freedom, not a lecture. That difference turned into a clash between generations. Cosby represented an older model of entertainment: suits, family-approved jokes, and respectability. Murphy represented the raw energy of a younger era, where personal truth and boundaries being pushed were part of the point. Instead of folding under Cosby's criticism, Murphy flipped it. He mocked Cosby's voice on stage, turning the scolding into a routine that made packed theaters roar. And when Richard Pryor bluntly told Murphy to ignore Cosby, the battle lines in comedy became clear. Decades later, at the Mark Twain Prize in 2015, Murphy needed only one sharp line to puncture Cosby completely. He didn't rant, he didn't unload. He simply shifted the balance with silence, broken at the exact right moment. Number 3, Howard Stern. Howard Stern built his career on creating chaos with a microphone. In the 90s and early 2000s, his radio show was a constant barrage of jabs at celebrities. He thrived on stirring up reactions. The bigger the star, the better. Eddie Murphy became a regular target. Stern mocked his movies, questioned his family life, and went after his place in Hollywood, sometimes spending entire segments tearing him down. For Stern, keeping Murphy's name in his mouth was entertainment. For Murphy, it wasn't even worth addressing. That contrast is where the story becomes interesting. Stern's entire act was to bait people into loud back-and-forth feuds that spilled onto headlines. Eddie never gave him that satisfaction. He stayed quiet through years of digs that could have easily triggered a public clash. And when Stern suddenly issued a blanket apology tour in 2019, naming stars he had wronged in the past, Eddie's name wasn't on the list. The silence was noticeable and telling. Asked about it later, Murphy didn't explode. He simply remarked that he doesn't hold grudges, but he does keep notes. A perfect reminder that outlasting the noise was always his win. Number 4. Richard Pryor. Eddie Murphy once said Richard Pryor was everything to him. As a teenager, he studied Pryor's albums like textbooks, copying the rhythm, the pauses, even the way Pryor leaned into a punchline. Before Eddie ever set foot on a national stage, he had already decided that Pryor was the gold standard, the highest level a comedian could reach. That awe shaped the foundation of his own act. But the relationship wasn't simple. Within Pryor's circle, especially among those who protected his legacy, Murphy was often seen as too polished. His sharp suits, his movie deals, his Hollywood rise, it all looked distant from the grit and rawness that defined Pryor's authenticity. Eddie felt the gap, and worse, he sensed that Pryor never really recognized him as either an heir or a peer. The coldest moment came in 1998, when Pryor received the Mark Twain Prize. While many expected Murphy to speak that night, he stayed away. The silence said everything. Years later, he finally gave Pryor his due with a short reflection. There's only one Richard. I was lucky to walk behind him. Number 5. Paul Mooney. Paul Mooney was best known as Richard Pryor's closest ally, his writing partner, and the man who proudly carried Pryor's legacy. He built his reputation on telling difficult truths, cutting through Hollywood polish with blunt commentary that often made power players uncomfortable. To fans, he was fiercely authentic. To comics, he didn't respect. He could be ruthless. When it came to Eddie Murphy, Mooney rarely held back. He dismissed Murphy's style as too smooth, too Hollywood, and lacking the kind of raw honesty that he believed real comedy demanded. These weren't explosive takedowns, but subtle cuts dropped in interviews that cast doubt on Eddie's authenticity. Mooney positioned himself as the keeper of an unfiltered tradition, and he didn't see Murphy as part of it. Eddie heard those dismissals, but his response wasn't to fight back. He kept his distance, avoided collaborating, and in one of his few pushbacks remarked, "I made people laugh, just not me." That simple line carried more bite than any insult. Rather than engage in a drawn-out feud, Eddie let his career speak, closing a door that stayed closed. Number 6. Cat Williams. Cat Williams built his reputation as a fearless comic. He wasn't afraid to call out stars bigger than him, and fans came to expect him to swing at legends. His energy, his delivery, and his sharp tongue made him stand out against safer comedians of his time. What made him different was his directness. He often went right for the biggest names, a move that kept his own profile in constant conversation. When Eddie Murphy came up, Williams didn't hesitate to push the idea that Murphy was no longer at the top. He claimed Eddie wasn't in the top 5 anymore, pointing to family-friendly films and suggesting Murphy had gone soft. It wasn't just criticism. It was an attempt to show a generational shift, as if Eddie had been moved into comedy's past, while Williams insisted his own boldness represented the future. Eddie's response was surprisingly calm. He laughed and said, "Everybody's got a mic now. Doesn't mean they're saying something." That one line reminded people that Murphy's work already spoke for itself. He didn't need sparring matches. His place in comedy history was already set. Eddie Murphy's list of so-called enemies doesn't really reveal bitterness. It shows control. Instead of throwing himself into public feuds, he chose silence, distance, and the occasional cutting one-liner. That restraint sent a clearer message than yelling ever could. The real story isn't about grudges. It's about how Murphy decided who could stand beside him and who couldn't. He shaped the narrative by what he left unsaid, letting others waste words, while he guarded his respect. In Hollywood, people fight to stay heard. Eddie proved sometimes the strongest voice is the quiet one, and that silence can hold the most power.